Amen.
Good morning, welcome, and so glad to be here today with you and studying in this wonderful, wonderful, amazing opportunity to study Torah with Rashi. And I've been thinking a little bit about, the footprint he laid down, and here's so many centuries later, and his words. Of course, what he did was he took the words from the Talmud and the Midrashim and all this, and just presented them to us. Would he ever imagine that here in the United States of America, which hadn't been discovered yet by the Western's, at least Western civilization as we know it, possibly the Vikings, I don't know, but that here we would be reading it. So here we go. I'm going to start sharing the screen. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
And we are in VaYikra in the book of Leviticus. And you can see my screen at this point. All right, let's go. Make sure I'm where we need to be. All right. We actually, I believe we did this yesterday. And I still remember the mistake I made in reading this word, by the way, ba'aleha. Ah, dear. Okay. So we actually, I believe, started to read about the Mincha Ma'afet Tanur, a baked mincha, a baked meal offering, a baked offering of flour. And we read that it was either unleavened cakes or loaves or wafers, rikike. And let's go here. All right. I'm trying to see. Oh, and it talked about it being smeared, that the loaves were mixed with oil and the wafers would be smeared with oil. And that there was a discussion amongst our sages as to what exactly that smearing on the wafers involved and how much oil had to be used. So half a liter. So let's see, 0.14 of a US gallon. So what, a little more than a pint? I'm not sure. I haven't done the math. Here we are. So now we have a different kind of mincha. The in mincha al mahavat korbanecha. So we have some choices as to what kind of meal offering we can use. Incidentally, think about the way in which we are able to use flour and the different ways in which you can add yeast to flour, you can add baking powder, you can just use flour, etc. But all the various permutations and combinations of how we use flour, and it's astounding. So we have a few options here. So if his mincha, right, is on the griddle, in other words, we're looking more like something that is where it's not exactly baked, but cooked, I suppose, right? Your offering. If your offering is a mincha that is on the griddle, solet lulav hashemen, it should be fine flour. Solet is fine flour. Lulav hashemen, it's mixed with oil. Matzah tihiyeh, it should be a wafer, right? It should be pretty flat. So let's take a quick look and see what Rashi has to say here. Okay, the mincha al hamachvat. If it is a meal offering that is on a stovetop or a griddle, right? She'amar, so what would happen here? The whole thing would be initiated by a declaration. By the way, making declarations of your intent, in other words, expressing and articulating your declaration has a lot of halachic significance, and allows you sometimes certain situations, because what you're saying, when you declare it, when you're using your mouth and your vocal cords to declare your intention, it is a very high level of intentionality. So, She'amar, what happened? This person said, Hare alai. So you know that this Hare alai is the form of a vow, right? I take upon myself. I think that's how we could translate that. I take upon myself minchat mahavat. right? I take upon myself a mincha of a mahavat, of a griddle. Ukli, so he's explaining, Rashi's explaining exactly what is a mahavat. Right? Uklihu, it's a type of utensil, shaya b'mikdash, which was actually in the sanctuary, it was in the temple, she'ofin bo mincha, in which they're able to bake a meal offering al ha'or, over the fire, b'shemen, in oil. So it's sounding awfully like donuts, right? Fried flour, fried dough. However, there's a difference. It's not a deep fryer. V'hakli eino amok. But this particular utensil or vessel is not deep. Ella saf, but it is flat. So you can, smear the top of the griddle, okay, with the oil, etc. Umase hamincha shebetocho, and the nature of this mincha that is in it, that's used in this particular vessel, this utensil, kashin, they're hard. They wind up being quite hard. Shemitoch shehit safa, because it is on top of, I believe, safa. Either it means saf, I always thought meant to sort of float or something like that. Ha'or sorif et hashemen, the fire burns the oil, the kulan, and so period. So, and I think tsafa means it's floating, or it's on this oil. It's being fried. I think it's essentially what Rashi is trying to tell us, right?
Well,
Go ahead. What do you have, Lauren?
and
You
it
have a
says
different
here
one?
shallow.
Okay, tsafa, shallow. I'll put
Well,
that
I
in.
guess that's safa because,
Yes, it would be. I believe so. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted
well,
you.
I'm, in terms of like trying to figure out which word is being translated here, but it
No,
says
that's good. That's good. That's good.
this vessel is not deep but shallow. And then
Mhm.
later it says, and therefore meal offerings made in it were hard, for since the pan was shallow,
Oh,
the
okay.
fire consumed the oil.
Right. Look at this. I actually translated up here. I looked up Jastro, and here it is flat. Do you see that? Tsaf, there's the word. And I just didn't pick up. I guess it's too early in the morning for me to realize that there was the word right there staring me in the face. Okay. So shallow or flat. That's where it is. So when I prepared this, I looked up the word saf and found that definition. Right. Because it's right. Okay. Bekulan te'unot shalosh matanot shemen. And they all require, it sounds to me, and Lauren, just make sure my translation is accurate, what it means is 3 applications of oil. So you apply the oil 3 times, yitzika, which would be pouring it, ubilila, and mixing it, umatan shemen bekli, and again, you place this oil into the vessel, kodem la'asiatam, before they're prepared, before they're made. Solet blula bashemen, right? Fine flour mixed in oil. Melamed, right? So this teaches you shebololan, that you don't apply this afterwards. Remember with the other loaves and wafers that we had been talking about, it sounded like the oil was applied after they were baked. But this he's saying is because it says solet, because it uses this word fine flour mixed with oil. This tells you that they have to be mixed while they're still flour. So you mix the flour with the oil. So again, what is beautiful about this is just how carefully they're analyzing every word of this particular text. And I think this is possibly part of this legal tradition that we have as a Jewish people, right? Is to really break down and analyze. And we love wordsmithing, as some of you may know if you've worked on committees that are trying to come up with a document. But again, just a real love of trying to understand and get down to all the implications of the words. So going on, patut ota pitim. they shall be broke into pieces, or break them, could be an imperative, break it into pieces, into little pieces, v'yatzakta aleha shemen, and then you should put oil upon it, or pour oil upon it, mincha hi, it is a mincha, it is a meal offering. So let's take a look at Rashi on this. Patot ota pitim, right? Lerabot. So he says that I think it's because he's saying in general, he says lerabot kol hamenachot hane'efot. He's saying this is to take into account, right? This is to include, lerabot, to include all those mincha offerings, hane'efot, which are baked, right? That are baked. Kodem kmitza lefitita. Kodem kmitza. Before you take the komets, remember that small little part that we explained a couple of days ago, how you bend over those three fingers to your palm and you take that amount to put on the altar. So before you do that, you have to break it into small pieces. V'yatzakta aleha shemen. You shall pour oil upon it, mincha he, it's he, even though the kativ is who, right? You see that hey vav aleph, but there's the chirik, the e sound underneath the hey. So it's telling us that despite the fact that it's spelt as who, we're supposed to pronounce it as he. But Rashi here, at least the text of the Rashi here, is quoting the Torah as it's written. So he says, the fact that it's emphasizing it is a mincha, right? What's this emphasis coming to do? Because any even slight variation has implications, and to try and pick up what the implications are and spell them out. L'rabot kol hamenachot leyitzika. So this is to tell you that all the menachot, all these meal offerings, require this kind of pouring on it, right? Yachol, but he says that's what that would say. Yachol af minchat ma'afet tanur. Would that also then include a mincha that is a oven? Tanur is an oven, a bake oven, ma'afeh, baked, a mincha that is baked in an oven. Chain. Would that include that as well? Since it's this he, right, seems to tell you that it's any kind of mincha. And Rashi is saying, but does that include does that include these kinds? And by the way, this kind of discussion, I think, actually predates the Talmud. And we find this kind of discussion in these, what are called halachic midrashim, such as, and so in the halachic midrash that is still extant, it is in fact, and that's called the Sifra, which is on the book of Leviticus. So is that the case? Talmud Lomar. And so scripture states aleha, okay? So it has to be on it. Eitzei et hachalot velo otzi et harakikin. So it says, so look at this, how it goes, all right? Upon it, eitzei et hachalot, I should exclude the chalot, the loaves, velo otzi et harakikin. So you might think, oh, okay, it's just referring. Remember, it talked about the wafers, the rikikin, along with the chalot, along with the cakes or the loaves, when it was talking about when it's baked in an oven. So it's saying, well, if this is, if it says aleha upon it, does that just mean the chalot and not, it doesn't refer to the wafers? Talmud Lomar, he. So the he, which says it, right, is something that would say it as opposed to something else. So this is a really very, very subtle and deep exposition and analysis of the wording here to try to get as close to the meaning of the text of what the quote, you might say, legal meaning of this text is in terms of practicing halacha. And I would say that, and it's complicated, and it requires a lot of study. But again, when we say you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, how seriously do we take that particular expression? And I would say that we just read an example here that part of that love is the detail to which we are exposing the text and trying to analyze the text and saying, we really want it to be as perfect as possible. So we're going to go to that kind of trouble to do it. This might be a good point to stop today. And so I think I'm going to do that. And God willing, tomorrow morning, we will pick it up with the Shlishi, And I'm going to stop the share. And feel free, if there are any thoughts, any comments about what's going on here. Do you have any takeaway that you can have from this? All right. So while you may be thinking about that, we'll go back to why minachot are maybe as significant as they are and why they play a part here when the general context we know tends to be animal sacrifices. So we need to understand that the animal is a substitute for ourselves. That when a person brought an animal to sacrifice, they would put their hands on the horns of the animal. And if it was a sin offering, they would declare their sin as they held this animal. And this all goes back even further to when Abraham took Isaac and took him to Mount Moriah, which is the temple site, okay, and was ready to offer him. And when God provided the ram in the place of Isaac, God was saying, and at least the way we understand this, was saying to Abraham, I will accept the ram in the place of your son. And he actually uses that kind of word. And since Abraham and Isaac, they are patriarchs, this allows then the whole sacrificial system. So we should understand that these animals are actually ourselves. Now, remember, I mentioned a couple of lessons ago how I understand the hamotzi lechem min haaretz is actually talking about human creation, and that all goes back to Genesis, where God takes the dust of the earth, adds water to it, and forms a human being. And the dust and flour is therefore metaphoric for dust, so that even these minachot have the same implication as taking the animal. Because when we take a mincha and offer it up, it's similarly saying we're offering up ourselves. And it just seems to me, even though perhaps I hate to say it, am I a hypocrite? But that our real purpose in life is to be able to serve our Creator. And serving our Creator means, being compassionate to other human beings. Part of serving our Creator is being considerate and loving and respectful to creation, so that it all sort of fits together in this particular way. And if you want to comment, I'll keep the recording going. Otherwise, I will end the recording here.